Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Vodka O'Clock Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Love from AmberUnmasked.com. And I'd like to thank the backers at Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/AmberUnmasked to join in the support of the show and my weekly cat stories, and the Instagram, of course, has daily stories of our adventures. And you also get to have bonuses like listening to the show before other people if you become a backer. So joining me today is my old friend, Eric Grissom. We're going to talk about comics.
Hello. Yes, it's been so long. It's been too long. 2 years, I think. It's like every 2 years we're like weird cicadas that burrow up from the ground. It's like, hey, I got a new book. No, this is great. Thank you for having me back on the show. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I know. You were doing. Well, it seems like you do like all kinds of genres.
Yes, and then the last time was Gregory Suicide, which was the other book. Same person. When we talk about Goblin, Will and I did Gregory Suicide for Dark Horse. Totally, complete opposite end of the spectrum from the book we're coming out with now, called Goblin. So yeah, it was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing that it's like my genres tend to be all over the place. It's like you've got Animals that I did with Claire Connolly, and kids will see Planet Gigantic or Goblin. Like, oh, what's that? You can't look at that. There's naked humans hanging on meat hooks, and that one's about the meat industry. You don't want to read that one. And so it's like, you gotta put the things on different sections of the table, become sort of quarantined off from little people.
Yeah, I know. But I did feel that that this one resonated a lot, like with The Mark, because it was, a little forest creature and
I definitely have, I think, a genre of forest, haunted forest aesthetic runs pretty deep in my bones. Yes. Somebody that, like a reader of the newsletter that I had, wrote in and was like, pretty much everything that you're writing has some kind of haunted forest in it. So you gotta really own that space.
You do, and whether it's earthly or a fantasy world or a different planet like Planet Gigantic, like there are these commonalities where, and I felt that reading through Goblin, which is a very long, book. This is an impressive story. It was like 188 pages. And you have it broken up neatly into like 13 chapters or something.
Yeah, I think it's, I should know this. I think it's 11 chapters, but around 15 or so pages each, I think. I mean, you could actually be right and I'm wrong, because the other thing is, like, these books take forever. So it's like I was a totally different person when I wrote it than now, because we've been done with it. We were done with it last year. But with the way that it works with Dark Horse, because they distribute through Penguin Random House, you sort of have to have everything set up a year in advance. Not to mention the time it takes to draw. Like, Will, killed himself drawing those 180 something pages, because he did all the coloring and the inking and everything. So it's like such a long period of time to go from start to finish. So when you look back, you're like, who is that wrote that? What was that? What was he thinking?
Yeah, I was going to ask about the process, because I had heard anyway, like before Dark Horse switched distribution, just that they are a bit slower in getting stuff out. Maybe that's just the smaller staff, or they're just more careful and selective.
It's from what to my knowledge, as far as like that year ramp up, that's pretty standard in the book world versus sort of the standard comic world. So like that's just one of the requirements from Penguin Random House, who does the distribution, is I guess they want everything done before it's solicited through their channels. Okay. At least that's the way. At least that's to my understanding. It's sort of, that's just the way it is.
And I think that's moving that way for most stuff. I mean, I know the weekly comic book buyers are hesitant, but I think a lot of it's just moving that way.
Yeah, and I think for graphic novels and things like that, it makes sense because you can factor in hopefully some kind of marketing plan, or you know it's done. You have all the materials to make whatever assets you need to make, and do things on your Amazon page and cut trailers and do all of that kind of prep work for like and it's done. You don't have to worry about waiting, because a lot of times if you're making for a visual medium like comics, the thing that really sells it is the artwork. And if the artwork's not there because you're not done, you don't really have it at your disposal to do the pre-order,
right.
When you're trying to get people to pre-order the book.
Yeah, you'd have to be like a pretty famous person to have just, be able to say, oh, the next,
right.
Adam Hughes project or whatever.
Yep. And then you end up in that cycle where a lot of the marketing is just for those people that are already established anyway, because it's such a small pool. And if you see a name that you recognize, you're more than likely going to pre-order it. So it makes sense from a publisher's perspective, who has a limited staff and limited budgets, to just sort of push forward the stuff that they know is going to get more eyeballs on it and is really going to have a better chance of someone ordering it or pre-ordering it than taking a chance on someone that nobody knows about, because you see all this noise and all this ads and all this everything that it's going to come and go, so that's sort of the thing. It's like you need to get there to get the things that allow you to get there. So it's sort of like you're kind of walking in circles a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I understand publishing is can be frustrating. I mean, and it's sort of because it all ends up connected in the entertainment world. It's like, you're talking about books and people think, oh, they're instant hits. And it's like, you wrote that book 5 years ago and, you're already like working on 3 other books at the same time.
Yeah.
And then, and then if a movie gets optioned or something, it's like another 10 years later.
Right. Yeah. If that perfect storm ever happens.
Yeah. So, so Eric, as he was saying, the background that he has is with like Planet Gigantic and Dead Horse, and you've always managed to team up with the most amazing creators. We mentioned Claire Connolly and Will Perkins, but I mean, Phil Sloan, Dave Halverson, I mean, the work is always impeccable and beautiful.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. And I tend to work like once I find someone that enjoys working with me and I enjoy working with them, I like to stay with them, because then you learn sort of their sensibilities and their taste, and they understand what you're looking for, and you sort of can find like a nice mix of the two to create something wonderful, hopefully. But yeah, no, I've been very lucky. I've really, from Phil Sloan, who the first comic I ever did was Dead Horse, which I still feel like I wasn't that long ago, but I think that was like 2009. So I've been doing this for quite some time at this point. He was just someone that worked at a pizza place next to a video game store that I had. And so we just became friends, and it was like, well, thank God I randomly became friends with such a brilliant artist. And so that was the first book. And then since then, it's just sort of, finding the right person and just sort of pushing the boulder up the hill and hoping that it doesn't crush you on the way down.
Well, the Perkins brothers always have a flair for the weird. So you've got with Goblin it's one of those great adventure stories where, like I said, every chapter is broken down cleanly, and it's like every chapter is a new task. So you just keep going along with the hero, and his name's Richt, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yep.
And he's this little goblin boy who loses his parents. They're murdered and by a human. So we instantly have this othering brought out right away. But Will's creations, I don't know how much you even need to say in your descriptions to when you know who your artist is, when it's somebody like Will, who is amazing with creatures. He's like got that imagination like a Jim Henson, and it was phenomenal.
He's wonderful. It was really great. Will was like, had known that I wanted to do this story, and for a while I was actually thinking this story was going to be a book, and not a graphic novel. And he really took to it, and was like, "Come on, you got to let me in on this." But we both have similar sensibilities. Like you mentioned, Jim Henson. Like I love The Dark Crystal, and Neverending Story. And Neverending Story is one of his favorite films. So like our headspaces were already sort of linked up with that sort of 80s fantasy. Like that whole period of time had a very lasting impact on me. Like films like Excalibur or Legend, the Ridley Scott film, that was also a huge, influence on this. And we're sort of in the same thing. So with the scripts, I always try to be a little bit more conversational in the descriptions and stuff. And I could be a pain, when I'm looking for something. I'm sure if Will was on here, he could agree to that. But we always find the spot. And the original script, like I really was like, oh, the goblin's got to be super ugly, like thinking the Legend type goblin.
Right.
And Will was doing that and trying that, but he can't help but make these creatures that you fall in love with and that are able to emote and you can connect with, which is, of course, is the way to go. So I'm sure if I was drawing it, he probably would have been uglier and not as nice as the Rick that you're going to get in this story.
Yeah, he's a little bit like the house elves from Harry Potter, like, and that's the thing. Like there were differences. Like there was that one that was like, creature who was like super creepy and crotchety, and then there was the sweet Dobby. But so you've got with Rick, he's very innocent and he's trying to move into manhood, if you will, and so he's got this very strong and loving relationship with his parents in different ways. His father's teaching him how to hunt, like you need to survive and this is what we do. And he like didn't want to kill things. He's like, okay, but this is what we do. And it was done with a lot of reverence.
I think there's something, and you mentioned it before about the woods. Like I am a sort of a very introverted person and I've always found like a lot of peace in the woods. And it's a place that my dad would take me, for years and years, and we would just hike through the woods. And there was always like this magic or this feeling that you have there that is sacred that I was trying to capture, and contrast that with sort of the humans and the violence and all of that stuff. So I feel like with this story and with some other stories, I'm always trying to get back to that moment. And that scene that you're talking about when they're hunting in the beginning, that was definitely trying to find some of the stuff that I remember too as a kid with my dad. And I wanted, nobody really gets along with their parents, especially when you're at that age. So like there is a lot of love there, but he's also kind of a pain. Like he doesn't really listen. He thinks he knows everything. So there's a lot of that going on that accompanies, adolescence anyway. So, and I love the idea of this story. You mentioned sort of the basic plot, and it is, I think, on the outside a revenge story, but it's really more, for me anyway, like a road type travel movie that I like, and about sort of, without spoiling anything, finding sort of those things that are maybe more important than the desire to punish.
Yeah, absolutely. You end up finding in the very last few pages a deeper message than the choice of revenge. I mean, there's obviously revenge is a very strong driver in storytelling. Peter Parker and Batman and all of the great legends of storytelling. There's somebody dies and it's like, oh, we have to get some vengeance.
Right.
Yeah. And then it comes down to like, well, will they or won't they at the very end,
Right. And the thing with that too is something that's been sort of done many times. And I hope that people, like, if you're looking at this from the outside, that you do give it a chance and walk through his journey and take his journey with him, because I feel like the intent was that it would be a lot more than that. Like, it's really more about the adventure and the experiences and everything, the characters that he meets along the way, than that sort of wrapper that's fairly standard hero tale, stuff.
Yeah, the different characters are so wonderful. I started like even making a list of them, and just because they each brought something else to the table, and what it was that every different being that Rick encountered brought something else different in him. Like he meets this goddess, and I want to talk about her because she's freaking amazing. But he also meets a couple like human women who are pretty dull and like in the head. And we get to see, Rick being clever, the way like kids are clever in that Huckleberry Finn kind of way or whatever. It's like, how can we trick these older folks and really get away? And it's just so cute. And that's where, of course, he gets. We were going to have to talk about the dog or the wolf, and Rick comes upon this encampment of these two ladies, these sisters. Sees that the wolf was trapped, and they're like dealers of some sort. They're gonna like sell things, they buy things and they sell things. So it's like, oh, he's got to save the dog. And then we come into this different version of the story immediately, where he's trying to get rid of the dog. Like, no, stay, no, go away. I didn't want you to follow me. And then it's like the boy and his dog story,
right?
Where it's just so cute and relatable. It's like, and I have a feeling you were that boy with the dog.
No, I'm definitely a huge dog lover. So I was like, we gotta put a wolf in this. And plus, there's some like throwback a little bit to like the Legend of Zelda, which I'm a huge fan of, and Twilight Princess. You have the some wolf elements to it, and so all of that I kind of always was drawn to. But I like the you mentioned the two merchants. They were so much fun to write because they're just awful people. But how prim and proper they feel. And I'm sure you can draw a direct line from the Skeksis right to those the Skeksis from Dark Crystal right to those merchants. But they were just so much fun. And it was like, they're only in it sort of a chapter. Oh, maybe just a chapter. And that was a ton of fun. Like, and some of the lines that I've made them say, I realize are super dumb. But it was making me laugh while I was putting that together.
No, it was fun. It was funny. It's like in Hocus Pocus. It's like you have these, the witches are hideous at first. And so you have these hideous witches, trapping children. And so in this case, they'll just like, they'll trap anything. And it wasn't for boiling them into spells or whatever, but it was, to sell them on. But it was still that same kind of thing. Like, how can we outsmart them and get out of this situation? While the sisters, like you said, they think that they're of a particular class, and they're hilarious.
100%. And then we get to the fish breath, which was he needed Rick. That's the wolf pup, a companion, and like, because I didn't want to have him wandering this whole place alone. So there needed to be, someone to, to talk to, and just not to be, because it's about, even though he is on his own, you never really are. There's always there's always going to be something that you can find or someone you can find to get you through all of it.
Yeah, and in this case, it's the wolf's choice to be the companion as opposed to something that needed to be tamed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wasn't forced to be domesticated. He was just like, you saved me. I'm with you now. Like, you're my person, you know?
Yep.
And that, you know, we were talking about rescuing animals and how they react differently. Sometimes they're just like, whoa, you're the greatest. And like my friend Natalie, she has a cat, Ron Swanson. And the cat was named Ron Swanson by the shelter because every time they tried to adopt this cat out, people brought it back. So this cat had been like in and out of like 4 different homes because like he didn't warm up to anybody. And it just seemed like the weirdest thing. So Natalie met this cat and she's like, well, I have to take him then.
I'm so happy that ended on a positive note.
Yeah, he's a total love bug, an absolute like snuggly love bug. And it's just the cat had to find their person. Mm-hmm. And you've encountered all kinds of animals that were in need of rescue.
Yeah, we have 2 dogs and a cat. And we were talking before we started recording. Our cat came from some person was hoarding cats, and when Hurricane Sandy hit, God, when I don't even remember when that was. Was that like 2008 or something?
I don't even know the year.
I don't even know. I can't even remember. It was a lifetime ago. But they just abandoned all the cats, so we were able to get this very cool Murray as our cat, or Little Murray Sparkles, as my kids named him. I wanted to name him Ghostface Kitty, but I lost the. But he's all white. He's got like 2 different color eyes, so he's a very cool little fella. And then 2 dogs, and I think by the time that I was writing Goblin, we had just gotten Lola, our dog, who's like a hound mixed with a black lab, and she's completely nuts. So she definitely had some effect, I think, on that character.
Yeah, and the hoarding situation, I follow a few shelters on Instagram, like Clifton Cats and Catsbury Park. Mm-hmm. They're pretty big here in Jersey. So when they've been, one of them recently came across a hoarding situation, and it's just devastating when you're talking like pulling 40 cats out of a disastrous situation. And some of them are so feral, like they don't want to be handled, but they're used to food sources. And that's, it takes all kinds of patience and stuff, but sometimes they get them into the crates and they're just terrified. And then other ones are just like, hey, what's this?
Yeah, what's happening?
Like food and a warm place to be? This is amazing.
Yeah, humans are the worst. That's the
problem. We totally are. Yeah, we totally are. And that's something actually that kind of comes across in Goblin. Humans are without a doubt the bad guy in the story.
Yeah. And I would say like not complete, like there are some cute, again, I don't want to spoil anything because there's things, but it's not so black and white. Hey, humans are all terrible. Because I think a lot of what Goblin does, or at least tries to do, is about what you think someone is like based on their appearance or where they are, does not match who they really are. So there are some human characters that are kind, but to your point, yes, for the most part, the humans are the baddies.
Right. So that's when we encounter, the main human character is this bad guy,
who the man with the scorpion tattoo on his face.
Yeah, with the tattoo, and he's huge hulking guy with a sword.
And a lot of that came too from at the time that the original concept many, many years ago came up. I was just playing a lot of Skyrim too, and playing a lot. And also when you're playing like Legend of Zelda or whatever, like Link will just walk into a house and just start smashing people's pots looking for rupees. Like, who is this? Like in the real world, he would be a monster. Like, this guy is horrible. And the same thing with like Skyrim, like walking around, you put a bunch of arrows in these goblins in a cave somewhere, and then you go through their pockets and you take whatever they have and you move on your way. Like, what happens to the one goblin whose family that was? Like, how does he cope, and how does he see the world, and how much of what people talk about goblins is propaganda put out by humans that want to justify the fact that now they're building a town where there used to be a goblin village.
Yeah. And it, of course, took me back to some D&D, which then I understand you learned from a little bit of D&D during this.
This is weird. Like, I have a weird backstory with this because it's very much inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, though I never played Dungeons and Dragons not until recently. The only one time that I played Dungeons and Dragons was when my dad took me to some woman he was having an affair with. Her husband and like two of his army friends were playing D&D, and I was like 10 years old, and they're like, you can play. And they named me Herpes. Real great bunch of guys. It's a weird situation when you think about it, because it's like my dad's going to this woman's house where something's going on with them. They leave and then leave me with whatever. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot in my backstory to unpack that for later days. But like, so that was the only time I had played. But I always loved the idea of Dungeons and Dragons, and I was obsessed with the cartoon from the 80s. It was like my favorite thing in the world. And I devoured those Endless Quest Dungeons and Dragons books, that most of them, the good ones that I remember, were written by Rose Estes. And she like saw, if you remember Choose Your Own Adventure,
yes,
the exact same concept. So Choose Your Own Adventure was around, and it was huge. And she was working for TSR, who makes Dungeons and Dragons. And she went to them, was like, we should do this. This is like a good idea. And they were like, nah, whatever. And from what I've read, she just kept asking. And they were like, you know what? You do it. And she went, and they're massive hits. She wrote like at least the first 6 or 10 or whatever. But I love those books. So there's actually, in Goblin, there's an homage at one point to something that happens in Return to Brookmere. But yeah, that idea of Dungeons and Dragons fed directly into Goblin. And by the time we were like thinking, okay, well, how do we promote this thing? For Gregory Suicide, I was like, oh, let's do like a comic on Instagram. We'll just do this extra new comic, which we did, but it didn't do much. So I was like, I don't want to do that again. So then I was like, oh, what if I wrote like a Dungeons and Dragons game, like a one shot that will use those rules, so I don't have to worry about creating those rules, but I'll create like a campaign, a very, quick thing you can do in a night or 2 nights, and I'll do it. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. And it was so hard because, I'm coming from a very, from like a narrative, like, this, you go from point A to point B, and I'm in complete control over everything, to having to write something where you have these variables of players that are not going to do what you want them to do. The game itself is very complicated for anyone that's never played, but I'm lucky that I've known Paige Connolly for years, who we mentioned, Claire, that's her sister. So I knew she knew the game really well. So I was like, Paige, can you help me out if I write this game? And will you tell me if it's broken or if it sucks or whatever? And she was completely awesome. She's a fantastic artist too. I would recommend looking at her work. Her and Claire are both really good artists, and they have totally different styles.
Right.
But anyway, she was amazing. So yeah, we did it. We had people play test it. Will did artwork for it, as well as helping me play test it. And it's available right now for free. So if you play any kind of Dungeons and Dragons tabletop game, you can go to realmofgoblin.com and download it and check it out.
Yeah, which sounds like a fun thing, because it's when you get into this adventure, and if you have the reading experience like I did, where you feel really sucked in and connected and like you want more, then it's like, hey, yeah, you can have, you can have more, and in this other way that's immersive.
Yeah, and the world is full of things. Like, one of the things that I like to do is when I'm writing, I'll think of a whole bunch of things that a character has been through, or something that happened, some big event. And even though that may never ever get into the book or the story, it helps me to understand that the world is real, even though it's not real. But so I had all that stuff to sort of feed into the game. And one thing that Will likes to do too, which I think is why we work so well together, is when he's drawing something for himself, he'll always put like a little bit of something in the distance, or he'll know that there's a tribe of dinosaurs there or whatever. So we're always sort of planting these seeds in this world that this whole thing can really grow into something much, much larger than it is. And I think the game is the beginning of that. But I hope to visit this thing many times over through other books, as long as people buy it and it finds an audience, or more games or whatever. It's a ton of fun. And this game itself is really built. It takes place before the events of the graphic novel. You do not need to play the game to read the graphic novel. And honestly, you could play the game and never read the graphic novel, although I hope you do both. But if you do play the game, you'll see things and you'll make choices in the game that you will see the results of in the book. So ideally, you would play the game before you did the book. But I'm sure you could do it in either order if you had to.
Yeah. I mean, heck, I've done that with like TV shows and movies where I'm like, they only have like season 3 on demand or something like that. I'm like, all right, well, let's watch it.
Right. Jump right in.
But so the farce, this is why I feel like I was so relating to just, like I just dropped into it so easily. Because of the adventures Gus and I take, and we'll find these really cool trees. And I like to just take pictures of them. And then I come up with the stories of, there are certain portals. You can tell like which shapes are portals to the underworld, and they naturally disintegrate. And then the creatures have to like make new portals. So we find them in other places, and certain trees just lend themselves to cool stuff. Like they just naturally look like little fairy houses, and they're covered in moss. And then we have like our formal fairy garden, which is, like totally different because it's, it's got the human elements to it. But I just love finding these, trees that have fallen over and moss growing and rocks in just the right place. And, I take tons of pictures of this stuff, and, and Gus is just kind of like hunting and looking for critters and things that move. So, when your character Rick his quest is you have to go find the goddess, and then she sends him on a quest to find the first tree, this big, huge, magnificent tree, which I've never seen a tree like that, but I've seen pictures of the redwoods, and I'm just in awe that trees are like that. It's like, I know they're here on this planet and I've never seen them. So and then the goddess herself, it's like, you didn't even, and this, credit to Will, of course. I don't know how much you had to discuss with him. Like most people by now know, like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, they know Groot and like baby Groot and grown up Groot. So you've got this tree woman goddess, but without making her look like, oh, she's a human with big boobs and just, like Poison Ivy, like slapped on her.
That was very important to Will, especially making sure she didn't look like Poison Ivy. Not that there's anything wrong with Poison Ivy.
No, but it's different.
But yes, but that was like, and specifically he was like, I don't want this to end up looking like just a human. It had to be something otherworldly, and that was 100% where it needed to be. And we went back and forth with her a lot. I think she was the hardest character to get down. But once we did, we knew that was it.
Yeah, because there are these details in her. Like first there's like her face, so you can see expressions, and even though it's all like tree branches and roots and stuff. But then the part that I always focused on was this underneath the rib cage area and this diaphragm area is this glowing heart, this glowing soul that just through different traditions, through like Tai Chi and martial arts and all kinds of stuff, like there's like that's like where Bruce Lee would like, punch you and knock you, like kill you with 1 inch or whatever, the 1 inch punch. But so it's like that part of the human body is this sensitive part. It's soft. It's where the diaphragm is. It's where you need to breathe for life. And yet here, hers is like, it's open, it's exposed, but there's this glowing in it. Yeah. And I thought that was really cool. I'm like, she doesn't need to be afraid of this part of her being exposed.
Yep.
It's like there to share.
Yeah, and I think there's something to sort of the womb and life and creation and all of that kind of stuff built into her. Yeah, no, Will and I are a lot alike and also different in a lot of ways. Like where I was saying, I'm always sort of coming up with backstories or this means that. He's always, when he's drawing, has to have some kind of internal logic for himself that feed into all of this stuff. So when you get to some of the character designs, like later, there's a race of amphibian, like frog-like creatures called the Dofta, and they have like insects or birds that land on them. And like he has a whole ecosystem in his head about how there's this symbiotic relationship between the birds of the of that area and the amphibians. So he's always sort of working that stuff through. And I feel like he's much more sort of a realistic, or like something has to work in the real world for him to find his way. Whereas I tend to be more intuitive, and if it feels right, that's the direction that I go. And I think the two of us together find something really unique in that way.
Yeah, and as soon as I saw the frog people, I'm like, oh yeah, the frog people. I know Will's frog people.
Right. Yeah, I know if I'm doing something and Will's involved, he's got to have a frog person. Like the first time we worked together was Planet Gigantic, and it was a backup story. And of course, I was like, Will, frog runner, we're doing a frog person. So, yeah. If I'm the tree person, then he is the frog person, I guess.
Yeah, it's just wonderful. It's like your elemental personalities,
right.
and it comes out. How much, since you said that this had to be done so far in advance, how much of this was done during the pandemic? We've had a year.
I'm trying to remember when it was finally finished. It was all through the pandemic, right? So it was maybe last October or November or something we finished. I honestly can't remember. I don't even remember like what days are mean anymore, or like,
yeah, no,
like, I have no idea, but I think we've definitely finished it last year, and we worked through the pandemic on it as well, I believe, right? Or maybe we didn't. Maybe it was the year before. I don't remember.
Oh no.
I don't remember. That's kind of weird. I think maybe it's even older than that. Who knows? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Just go through my emails and see, when the hell did we finish this?
I'm shocked by that when I go through emails and I'm like trying to do the math. I'm like, that doesn't work. I'm like, math is wrong. Like, yeah. it's just wrong. Yeah. I mean, we lost a whole year basically.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, it's crazy to think about all that time. And for me, like, I feel like I didn't really we put this book together, so whether or not I was actually putting this book together, but I feel like I got nothing creative done. I feel like when I look, I'm like, oh, what stuff did I really put out? It's like, not really anything. And it's tough because, like, for me, I have very little time. So it's like I have a very small window to do anything, and I usually do one thing. So if I end up getting hired to letter someone's book, it's like, I guess that's what I'm doing with my mornings instead of working on my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's tough. It's tough because like, as time goes by, the window of opportunity to make things becomes smaller. And that's, for me, directly linked to my mental well-being. So it's like, hopefully, the solution is we just sell a lot of copies of Goblin, and then I can just do that instead of doing all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, that's the plan. That's the plan. And you look for a shooting star.
Yeah. You just wander into the woods. You find a tree and you walk into it.
Yeah.
And you get to the real world.
Yeah. Like Nightmare Before Christmas, right? Yep. The different portals to different. I totally agree. But now, if I recall, you gave credit to your daughter, right, for drawing the map.
She drew the map. Yeah. So there's I'm a big fan of maps, and so like in the Mark, there's a map in the beginning on the end pages, and so I needed to have a map, like whether it was like reading The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings for the first time, and you see like those maps and you're like, oh,
they're beautiful.
A bigger world than I'm only seeing a portion of this bigger thing, right? So I knew I wanted to do that. And I hired, she's a great artist, my daughter. And so I was like, oh, I'll hire you to do this map. And so she did it. So that appears, and it's not her first time. She also did something, I think she did something in Gregory's Suicide. So I usually try to include something of hers in something I'm doing. But yeah, no, she was great. And it came out exactly the way I wanted it to. It looks like something.
How old is she?
Oh my God. She's going to be 16, which is nuts to think about because I don't know how that happened. But yeah.
I know. It's like overnight. Oh, she's almost a grown up. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing. I'm like, wait a minute, Ava. I'm like, he said his daughter's name was Ava. How did she do this?
Yep. No, she did that. She was great. So it's exactly what I wanted.
Oh, that's so sweet. She's not like, Dad, no, you're a dork.
Well, yeah, I think that happens anyway. But it's like, here's money. You can do this and then buy some K-pop thing or whatever.
So okay, it's Goblin. We don't need to go through any kind of Kickstarter. It's just
no. It's a regular book. It's a real movie, Jack. Yeah. So it's available now. Like if you go to Realm of Goblin, you can pre-order it, and I hope people do. You can get it on the big box stores on June 8th. So there's links for Amazon and Target. And hey, if you get that 5% cash back from Target on your Target card, you can get it there. Walmart, all of the links. Yeah, right? Okay. All of the links. Barnes & Noble, all of the links. And then if you're going to get it in a comic store, because the way comic stores are structured, it's too late because you didn't pre-order it. Because that window closed, right? So it's May 26th. But hopefully your shop ordered copies because of course they did. Of course they ordered copies. So that's May 26th in comic stores. And then it's June 8th everywhere else.
Okay. So that takes care of Goblin, but now I want to hear about if you've had time, what are you consuming and enjoying?
Oh, what am I consuming and enjoying?
Or are you just like finally just going off to the woods?
I'm not going to tell you that I watched season 2 of The Circle because that would be terribly embarrassing. Of course, I'm not going to say that. No, the thing that is true, and I have no shame or regrets. I just started Sasquatch, which I think is on Hulu, I think. But it is about a murder that took place in 1993 in Oregon at a pot farm that apparently Sasquatches did, or a Sasquatch has murders these people. And it's a writer who had worked at that farm. And then years later, now he's trying to uncover like what it is, but it's really good. It's really fascinating. And I'm fascinated by the pot growers that were doing business in the United States in the Northwest, particularly because there's just one area where the environment is perfect for growing pot. So there's a lot of money there, but then it's also like the war on drugs is in full swing. So the I forget the name of the group of the United States. It's some dumb military sounding name of what it was like, a crackdown on cannabis. So like there's lots of violence. It's almost like the Wild West because you're in the middle of these huge forests. There's not a lot of oversight. The crop is worth a lot of money, and it's sort of like a free for all. So it started with all these hippies, like people that went there to live off the land. And then slowly, as like, you know, all these drug raids are happening with the government and people start stealing from each other, they start arming themselves with like AR-15. So like there's this whole weird thing happening with hippies and firearms and everything. And so that sort of seems like the story is more about that than the Sasquatch, but you do get some Sasquatch stuff. I'm only 2 episodes in and I really, really like it. And the other thing I just watched the first episode of, which was the Kate Winslet show, The Mayor of Something, which I liked the first episode a lot. So that's what I've been watching. What about you?
Well, I don't know if it's coming back, but like there was a new show called Mr. Mayor with Ted Danson and Holly Hunter, who is like bizarrely nothing like any of her other previous characters. I mean, she's versatile to begin with, but she'll stand next to him and she looks like she's about 3 feet tall and he looks like he's 8 feet tall. And they're just at odds with each other. It's really a weird, like diverse cast and a very weird show that he's like the mayor in like Beverly Hills or someplace in La La Land. And, you know, and it's just like, he has no concept of how things like really work. But otherwise, is there anything new? I'm doing a lot of repeat viewing.
Yeah, that I find I do that a lot. Like I'll watch The Sopranos every year for like, it's embarrassing to say how many times I've watched that. Or like I'll watch Twin Peaks over and over. There's certain like, because I'll do it at work because I work, you know, like anyone else. So I'll have like something I've seen before playing that I can sort of listen to, or every once in a while I'll look, and there's like a comfort in that. You know, you're not going to miss anything because you've already seen it, and it's something. There's characters that you want to spend more time with.
Yeah. So but there are 2 animated things that you might dig. I've been watching Bless the Hearts, and The Great North.
Oh, so, yeah. What's that? What's The Great North?
The Great North is set in Alaska. And speaking of Ron Swanson, it's the voice of Nick Offerman as the dad. So it's a family that lives like, you know, middle of nowhere called like Lone Moose, Alaska, just like Dead Horse.
Mm-hmm. Look at that. Hey,
look at that.
Maybe they're fans. Yeah.
And so like it's a very Bob's Burgery kind of thing. You know, like it's all about family, but about like the weird people of the town too. Like there's the one episode where there's always a cake lady. Like every time they need a cake, like the mysterious cake lady, and nobody knows who it is, makes cake. So it's just like very weird shit like that. But they do get into some real issues. Like the youngest girl has like no friends. So she's, so her imaginary best friend is Alanis Morissette. So she climbs out to her roof every night to talk to Alanis Morissette, who That's really
awesome. And it's actually Alanis Morissette, right?
It actually is her, yes. And That's she great. Actually voices it. It's wild. And for some reason, the smallest child wears like a teddy bear onesie everywhere, like no matter how old he is. So it's, you know, so it's just like all sorts of weird stuff. But
that sounds great. It reminds me a little bit of like Gravity Falls. Have you ever seen that?
I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. Like it's been out. I mean, I don't think they make them anymore. But my son started watching it, and so I started watching it with him. It's awesome. Like if you like that Pacific Northwest weird, very Twin Peaks inspired cartoon. It's great, and they have like the guy that created the show also wrote a Choose Your Own Adventure book with the same character. So I got my son that for him, but also I'm like, let me read it to you again because I love it. But it has like all these like the thing I always liked about like Twin Peaks was how great the show was, but then there was all these like elements from the show in real life. Like if you've never seen the show before, there was Laura Palmer had a diary, and then you could go buy the diary, and now you were holding the diary. And this has cool. a similar hook where there's like this book that the character has, and you can actually buy the book, and my son has the book, so it's just very cool to go into those kind of worlds. But the show you're talking about, The Great North, I'm going to check out, but you should also check out Gravity Falls because I think
I'll see
a similar feel.
I'll have to see if it's on any, like we pay for all this like streaming stuff now, so it's got to be somewhere.
Yeah. Well, is The Great North, you said you watched it where?
It's on, I think, Fox. I watch it on Hulu.
Okay. Yeah, I have Hulu, so I'll check it out. And if you have Disney Plus, I know Gravity Falls is on that.
Oh, okay. I do have that. Yeah. And yeah, so Bless the Hearts is adorable. It's Southern though. It's the exact opposite. It's out in like, it's supposed to be like North Carolina or South Carolina. Again, with amazing voice actors. And just like typical weird shit of like the Black Friday episodes are to me the funniest because like they go to the Megalomart and they stand in line and they lose the baby and then they got to find the baby, and it's just like it's again, it's all about like the family and the weirdness of the people that are around. But if you like let's see, is Kristen Wiig, Maya Rudolph.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up now.
Yeah. So it's just like really funny, and like working in a diner and like how shitty the work is in the diner in ultra conservative Bible Belt area.
No, it's cool. It looks good. I'm looking at them now. So I guess it came out a couple years ago, but it's still out. Like
yes,
they're still doing new episodes.
Yeah, they have really short seasons. They short for American standards, still longer than a British season.
Yeah, I want everything should be British seasons. I want 6 episodes, and then I can not have anxiety about whatever it is I'm watching. Like my older girls and I watch Riverdale, which I actually really like Riverdale. Also, no regrets. I think it's a fantastic show. But like you get to season 2, it's like 24 episodes. Like who has time for that? Now I gotta like be sweating that I'm only on episode 13 and there's this many to go, and where's my time gonna go? And yeah, I love the 6 episode season that they do overseas. That's the way everything should be.
Yeah, so these newer cartoons are like 9 episodes or something.
Yeah, I can 13. I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
I can hang with you. You don't go over 13.
It's long, and that's the thing is when we were watching stuff weekly, it did feel like a really long time. So like, oh, this one broke up and they're mad at each other, and then it seems like forever until they get back together.
Yeah.
But then when you like just binge them, it's like, oh, that wasn't so long.
Right.
All right, Eric. Well, anything else that I
hope people give the book a chance. Like it's a middle grade level book, but it's really any 10 and over, I think, is totally fine. I think an adult would have a totally fine time reading it, but it is appropriate if you have someone that a younger person that likes also to get lost in the forest. I would hand them this and pack them a lunch and then give them like a GPS thing, because you don't want them actually to get lost in the forest, and let them wander around, and give the book a chance. You can go to realmofgoblin.com, and from there, we mentioned that Dungeons and Dragons game that's now available. You can download that for free if you like that kind of thing, and if you do, let me know about it. If you tag it Dark Sisterhood, I was going to send somebody or whoever tags it that like some stickers that I got to print up. But yeah, that's it. I hope you, go to the site. You can actually watch a trailer. You can watch a trailer on the site. You can get a feel for the book and see Will's artwork, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's truly beautiful art. And he did the coloring, you said?
He did. Yeah, he did. We're a 2-person team. So I do the writing and the lettering and usually the book design and all that kind of stuff. And Will does all of the pencils and the inks and the colors.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, just such a beautiful job. I loved it.
Well, thank you.
So where can people follow you?
Yeah. So, you can follow me on Twitter at eGrissom. And if I get to 1,000 followers, my 1,000 follower goal, so I can get the nice fancy jacket and they could let me into the cool table. No, but if I get to 1,000 followers, I am randomly picking a follower to mail a physical copy of the book to. So if you're not following, hey, I said this before on my own podcast. If you want to set up a burner account, I don't care. Just get them numbers up so I can have some fake nonsense metric that will turn my self-hatred around for 5 minutes. Go, things are finally working out. Look at this. Yeah, so if I get that, if I get to 1,000, follow me, eGrissom. I'm also eGrissom on Instagram, and I'm not on Facebook. So those are the two options.
Okay.
Or my newsletter, ericgrissom.com. I wrote almost too personal newsletter where I tell you exactly what I'm going through. That if you go to eGrissom.com and you get a free copy of the Gregory Suicide prequel, and you get some Dead Horse issues, and those are free. And then you sign up and you can hear what me sort of wallow in depression once a week, every Friday. So yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. And like you said, sock puppets, welcome. Get those sexy Russian bots with
Give me your bots. Give me your sexy Russian bots, please. Or not sexy Russian. The not sexy Russian bots need the most attention. So I'll take some of those. Just no evil trolls. I don't want any
none of those
right wingers coming.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and Will is what? Dill Perkins?
Yeah, it's hard for him. So he's Will Perkins Comics. Yeah, Will Perkins Comics on Instagram. And that's usually, I think, his preferred social platform of choice because he posts some great artwork there. And Dill Gherkins on Twitter. Gherkins. Yeah, I don't know. He's explained to me what that means, but I can't even remember.
It's just fun. Yeah. It's just fun to say. And so thank you to you and to your team for putting out such great product.
Oh, thank you.
And you guys, again, you can go to patreon.com/AmberUnmasked to help support my work and keep the cat stories coming, because I just invested in a new camera to help with the cat stories. And Instagram is Amber Unmasked, which is mostly cats. And Twitter, I've been backing off a bit on Twitter just because I've been doing other stuff with my time. But it's Elizabeth Amber at Twitter. Usually some political nonsense that I have to vent about there. But I'm happy to retweet other people's work as well. I've been spending time on Duolingo doing the Spanish and French lessons.
Oh, cool.
So I've been doing that instead of Twitter.
I would love to learn French. That has always been one of my life goals. One day I'm terrible at languages, so that's why it's not for a lack of trying.
I love French. So that's it for me and for Eric. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, and thank you.